This story is about my daughter, Samantha, Sam, who's now 24 years old. But before I dive into the heart of why I'm writing this, it's important to lay out the family background so you can understand where this all stems from. I'm a 51-year-old man, and I got married to my ex-wife, Judith, who's 49 now, when we were just 24. Our bond started early. Judith and I grew up together, practically inseparable since we were kids. Her upbringing, though, was far from easy. She came from a dysfunctional household, and she spent most of her childhood at my place, which eventually made her feel like part of my family. My parents embraced her fully. I had always loved her since I was old enough to understand what love was. Both of us came from modest backgrounds, and nothing was ever handed to us. Whatever we had, we built through sheer grit and hard work. At the age of 24, we tied the knot. At that point, I was working as a truck driver. I didn't have the privilege of going to college because I had to start earning as soon as possible. Judith didn't pursue higher education either. She was working as a waitress at a small local diner. Financially, we were doing okay. We weren't rolling in money, but we managed. We weren't missing meals, but we definitely had to be cautious about our spending. Things changed when Judith got pregnant with Samantha. At that point, Judith decided to quit her job to focus entirely on being a mom. It wasn't an easy decision financially. It added a lot of pressure on me as the sole breadwinner, but it made sense. We couldn't afford daycare, and I was earning more than her anyway. So we agreed this was the best move. I made some career changes too. I switched companies, got promoted, and after a few years, my income was significantly better. By the time Samantha turned 3, we were in a much better place financially. Those were good years, honestly. The economy was stronger, prices weren't as high, and even though we weren't rich, we could live a comfortable life without having to stress over every single expense. Things began to shift when Samantha started school. With our daughter away for a big part of the day, Judith started feeling restless and missed having a job. She said she wanted to get back to work, which led to a pretty intense discussion between us. In the end, we found a solution. I'd cut back on my hours a bit, which would allow me to help out more at home, and she could go back to work part-time. For me, that was a welcome change. I had been working long, exhausting hours for years, barely getting a break, 14-hour shifts, 6 days a week. I was often too drained to do much when I got home, so having the chance to spend more time with Samantha was something I cherished. That new arrangement really worked for us at first. It felt like we'd finally struck a balance between work and family life. I started coming home at more reasonable hours, which allowed me to spend much needed time with Samantha. I helped her with her homework, tucked her in at night, and it finally felt like I was truly connecting with my daughter after years of focusing only on work. Judith also seemed content with the change. She had been at home for so long, and now that she was working again, it seemed like she was enjoying a sense of freedom. She was a bit distant, but I chalked that up to her adjusting to life outside the house after being confined to it for so many years. I didn't mind picking up the extra household duties to give her a break. What I didn't realize was that while I was busy building a closer relationship with Samantha, Judith was quietly looking for a way out. When she found a new job, it wasn't at her old restaurant. Instead, she started working at a trendy cafe that catered to a more upscale clientele. I think being exposed to wealthier people in that environment changed her view of our life. To be clear, we weren't struggling financially, but we also weren't living in luxury. Suddenly, Judith began urging me to take on more hours and make more money, as if what we had wasn't enough. I pushed back. I didn't see the point. Sure, we could have had more cash, but I preferred spending time with my family instead of chasing an extra paycheck that wouldn't drastically change our lives. I wanted to be present for Samantha and hopefully rebuild the connection with Judith too. But something had shifted. Judith started acting cold, and over time, it felt like she had grown to resent not just me, but Samantha as well. The tipping point came a few months later when Sam was about 7. One night, Judith came home late, completely drunk. By that point, her drinking had escalated into a serious problem, and no amount of support or therapy seemed to be helping. That night, I lost it. I had been shouldering nearly all the parenting responsibilities for months. Judith was either working late or out, and I was left to manage everything: cooking, cleaning, helping Sam with school projects, and even braiding her hair before school. Samantha had become so accustomed to her mother's absence that she rarely asked about her anymore. It felt like I was a single parent doing everything on my own. So when Judith stumbled in that night reeking of alcohol, I snapped. I told her she needed to step up and be the mother our daughter deserved. I was beyond exhausted from doing both my job and hers. That's when she dropped the bombshell. She looked me dead in the eye and told me she wanted a divorce. On top of that, she admitted she had been having an affair for over a year. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions and confusion. Judith had met someone at the cafe, a man named Stephen, who was now 60. He was wealthy, and she had been seeing him behind my back for quite some time. She left us both, walking away from the life we had built to be with him. It was gut-wrenching, but as long as Samantha was safe, that was all I cared about in the end. Judith never fought me for custody. In fact, she showed little interest in keeping Samantha. I made it clear that she could live whatever life she wanted, but I didn't want her poor choices to influence Sam. That seemed to suit her just fine since her new boyfriend wasn't exactly keen on being around kids anyway. It felt like she had transformed into a completely different person, someone unrecognizable from the woman I once married and the mother of my child. From then on, it was just Samantha and me. Judith would occasionally drop by, making brief appearances in Sam's life, usually armed with lavish gifts to make up for her emotional and physical absence. She thought expensive toys and fancy clothes would replace the time and care she could never provide. But the reality was, I was the one raising Samantha day in and day out, and I took that responsibility seriously. It wasn't easy, but I would do it all over again without hesitation. The two of us built our lives together, even if it wasn't the ideal situation. I tried to be there for Sam in every way I could. I attended every parent-teacher conference, cheered at her sports events, and took her to countless birthday parties. I might not have been able to provide the luxuries Judith could, but I was present. I wanted to create a home where Sam felt secure, supported, and heard. I tried to strike a balance between being a father and being a friend, fostering an open and honest environment where she felt comfortable coming to me with anything. I won't pretend that I was perfect. I made mistakes along the way, as all parents do, but I always tried to be the best parent I could be to give her the stability and love that her mother couldn't. It hurt, though, knowing that Judith's extravagant lifestyle, made possible by her wealthy new husband, had a strong pull on Samantha. I could never compete with the kind of gifts Judith showered her with. I couldn't afford designer clothes or the latest gadgets, and as a result, I often felt inadequate. Sam naturally loved the excitement and allure of her mother's lifestyle. Judith's new world was full of wealth and extravagance, and it made me feel like I was always the boring parent. Over time, I realized that Sam began valuing the material things her mother gave her more than the time and effort I put into raising her. At first, I didn't make much of it. She was a child, and of course, kids are drawn to flashy toys and shiny gifts. I figured it was just a phase. What I didn't see was how deeply this was shaping her outlook on life. Her attachment to these material things slowly became part of her identity, a trait that carried with her into adulthood. When Sam turned 18, she told me she wanted to pursue a career as a hairdresser. I supported her completely. I enrolled her in a cosmetology course, and she worked incredibly hard to earn her certification. I was proud of her. She was focused and determined to build a future for herself. Shortly after graduating, she started working and quickly established herself in her career. After Samantha started her new job, I noticed she began meeting up with me less frequently. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured she was just busy adjusting to her new career, which is always demanding in the beginning. I wanted to give her space, understanding that the first few months of any job can be overwhelming. I missed our time together, just the two of us, but I never wanted her to feel bad about it, so I kept those feelings to myself. She deserved to live her life on her own terms. That's what I had worked so hard for. After all, to give her the chance to be independent and successful. But as time went on, it became more apparent that the distance between us wasn't just because of her busy schedule. There was something else going on, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I reached out to her a few times, asking if something was wrong or if I had unknowingly hurt her, but she always brushed it off, saying everything was fine. We weren't estranged, but we were far from close. I suppose it's natural for kids to drift away from their parents as they grow older, but it hurt more than I could admit because Samantha was all I had. After my divorce from Judith, I never dated or even entertained the idea of getting involved with anyone else. My focus had been solely on raising Sam and providing for her. I didn't want to complicate her life by bringing someone new into the picture, and I certainly didn't want her to feel any resentment toward. For years, she was my entire world, and I was okay with that. I figured as long as she was happy, that's all that mattered. But when she started pulling away, it felt like I was being left behind while everyone else moved on with their lives. What I didn't realize was that during this time, she had reconnected with her mother and was slowly favoring her over me. Now, Sam is 24, and she got married just 2 days ago. The days leading up to the wedding were filled with tension, and I ended up acting in ways I'm not proud of. About a month before the wedding, I learned that Sam and her husband, Mark, were covering the entire cost of the event themselves. Sam told me that while I was a significant part of her life, She didn't want me to walk her down the aisle at the ceremony. Hearing that crushed me because I had always imagined that moment, walking my daughter down the aisle, being there for her in that special way. When I asked her why, she explained that she found the tradition to be patriarchal and didn't feel comfortable with it. I swallowed my disappointment and assured her I respected her decision, telling her I would be there in any role she needed. But just 2 days later, I discovered something that completely shattered. There was going to be a traditional walk down the aisle after all, only it wasn't going to be me. It was going to be Judith's boyfriend, the very man she had an affair with and left me for. This wasn't information I was meant to find out, but Mark accidentally let it slip during dinner. I confronted Samantha about what I had heard, asking her if it was true. At first, she denied it, but I kept pressing her until she finally broke down and admitted the truth. She told me she had asked Stephen to walk her down the aisle because, in her words, he wasn't some middle-class embarrassment like me. Those words hit me harder than I could have ever imagined. Not even Judith's betrayal stung as much as that moment. Mark, trying to soften the blow, pulled me aside. He said it wasn't entirely Sam's fault, that his family had very strict, old-fashioned views, and the decision was made to keep up appearances with them. He was trying to be kind, but by then, I was already too hurt. I thanked him for trying to take the blame, but I told him I couldn't bring myself to attend the wedding after what had happened. I wasn't going to let myself be disrespected any longer. Mark seemed to understand where I was coming from, though he did say it would devastate Sam if I didn't show up. He told me she loved me, but I wasn't convinced. My mind was already made up. That night, I drowned my sorrows in whiskey, and honestly, I don't remember much after that. It was one of the lowest points of my life. I made the difficult decision to cut off all contact with Samantha. I blocked her on everything, phone, social media, completely. I didn't know if she tried to respond, and frankly, I didn't care to find out. At that moment, it felt like she had thrown away our relationship, and I couldn't bear the idea that she didn't care about me anymore. That was the last real conversation I had with her. Samantha got married yesterday, and as you can guess, I wasn't there. Early in the morning, though, I received a call from her, but it wasn't from her phone. She had borrowed a friend's phone to get through to me. When I picked up, she was hysterical, sobbing uncontrollably. It took a long time to make sense of what she was trying to say. Between the sobs, she told me that her mother, Judith, had shown up at the wedding drunk, completely out of control. Apparently, she made a scene in front of Mark's parents, which was a disaster because his family is very conservative and proper. The irony was striking. The very reason I wasn't allowed to walk Samantha down the aisle was because I wasn't refined enough for them. And yet here was Judith, the so-called sophisticated one, making a fool of herself in front of everyone. Sam tried to explain what had happened, but she was crying so much I could barely understand her. Frankly, I wasn't all that interested in the details at that point. It felt like too little, too late. I had already been cast aside when it mattered most, and now she was reaching out to me in the middle of the chaos her mother had caused. The pain she caused me was something I couldn't just sweep under the rug this time. I had reached my limit, and there was no way I could keep playing the role of the dutiful father, always cleaning up her messes while being cast aside. She had humiliated me by taking away the one thing I had looked forward to my entire life, walking her down the aisle and replacing me with a man she knew had shattered our family. I was done. I told Samantha that I was sorry for what she was going through, but from here on out, I could no longer do more than offer her my sympathy. She had made her choice, and now she would have to live with the consequences. She was so worried about me being an embarrassment while she put her faith in her refined mother. And look how that had turned out. I told her bluntly that I wouldn't be rushing in to fix things this time. She was on her own. Saying those words was like tearing my own heart out, but I had to stand firm. I had given everything I had to Samantha, my time, my energy, and my love, and in return, she treated me like I was something to be ashamed of. I couldn't allow her to continue walking all over me. For years, I had been the parent who was always there, who gave up everything to make sure she had what she needed. But it seemed that in her eyes, I don't care if there's some sort of star-crossed lovers destined to be together. What matters to me is that she chose betrayal over honesty, sneaking around and destroying our marriage instead of handling things like an adult. What matters to me is that she abandoned her role as a mother. I was left to raise our daughter on my own, while she chased the promise of a lavish lifestyle with her new man, and worst of all, she used that wealth to pull Samantha away from me, and it worked. Judith's influence has cast a shadow over my entire life, and no, I won't be the bigger person and forgive her. Not now, not ever. You can call me petty, you can call me bitter. It doesn't make a difference. I gave everything to our marriage and got nothing but heartbreak in return. For anyone thinking Judith and Stephen are the perfect couple, believe me, it's far from the truth. The scene she caused at Samantha's wedding proves that. She showed up drunk beyond belief. Before anyone could even warn Sam, Judith had gone over to greet Mark's family. Sam didn't know what was happening until the situation had already spiraled out of control. Judith, in her drunken state, began shamelessly flirting with Mark's father right in front of his wife and Stephen. It was humiliating for everyone involved. At first, they tried to brush it off, but things escalated fast. Stephen had to physically step in and pull Judith away from Mark's dad while she yelled at him to let her go. Stephen looked mortified, apologizing to everyone, but the damage had already been done, and it didn't stop there. Judith, still in a drunken fury, began arguing with Stephen. She accused him of being a hypocrite, claiming that if he could have affairs with other women, then she should be allowed the same freedom. Stephen's face turned pale. He told her to stop talking, but she wouldn't listen, and the two of them started a loud public argument right in front of everyone. From what I've heard, and by that I mean what Judith blurted out to the entire wedding party in her drunken rant, their relationship has been crumbling for a while. She exposed that Stephen has been cheating on her with multiple women, and she's been aware of it all along. But she pretends to turn a blind eye because at this point she can't afford to leave him. Judith has become so accustomed to the lifestyle Stephen provides that she's willing to overlook his constant cheating. She's been pushing him to marry her for years, but he always manages to dodge it. Who knows why? Whenever they argue, he smooths things over with gifts, sometimes for her, sometimes for Samantha. It's a sad pattern, really. At the wedding, Judith decided to air out every one of their dirty secrets. Stephen kept trying to calm her down, saying it wasn't the time or place for their marital issues, but she wouldn't listen. She started hitting him, pulling at his hair, making a huge scene. At one point, it got so bad that they were on the verge of calling the police. She scratched his face, and in self-defense, he pushed her away. She ended up stumbling into some chairs and even fell onto one of the guests from Mark's side. All of this happened in front of nearly the entire wedding crowd. Mark's parents were beyond mortified. They couldn't handle the embarrassment and were ready to leave. I can't really blame them either. The whole situation was a complete disaster, with many of Mark's guests leaving as well. It was chaos. Samantha had called me in the middle of it all, asking me to come and help, but I told her no. I'd reached my limit. By the time our call ended, both Stephen and Mark's parents had left the venue. Mark tried to catch up with his parents and convince them to come back, but it was no use. Judith, meanwhile, sat on the floor crying her eyes out, wailing about how she'd ruined her life, stuck with a man who constantly cheats, while her daughter was marrying a decent guy. I honestly think it wasn't just a drunken mistake. It felt calculated. Judith seemed so self-absorbed that it wouldn't surprise me if she sabotaged the wedding intentionally out of jealousy for the happiness she never had. The wedding turned into a complete catastrophe. Mark hasn't spoken to Samantha since the incident, and she's a wreck. She emailed me afterward to apologize for everything, but it came with a dose of blame too. She said I should have come to her rescue when she called, that it was my responsibility as her father to be there and try to fix things. I haven't replied to Samantha's email, and honestly, I don't think I will. There's so much I could say, but what's the point? I've come to realize that no matter how much I explain myself, she won't truly understand where I'm coming from. I need to focus on my own well-being now. She's caused me enough pain, and I have to protect myself from any more of it. For most of my life, I've put everyone else first, never thinking about what I needed. And for what? Nothing has been given back to me in return, so now it's time to prioritize myself. Maybe at some point, I'll tell her that I need a break, that I'll be in touch if or when I feel ready, but for now, that's all I can offer. I don't think I'll provide any more updates because I want to close this chapter for good. It still pains me whenever I think about what's happened between Samantha and me, but I can't change what's already been done. Maybe this was karma playing out on her wedding day of all days. She was so worried about how Mark's parents would perceive me choosing Judith and Stephen to be her real parents, but they're the ones who ultimately embarrassed her. And when everything came crashing down, I was the one she called to clean up the mess. Update 1. For those expecting a shocking follow-up, there isn't one. There's no dramatic twist or jaw-dropping event to share. Despite what some might have hoped, Mark hasn't left Samantha. They're still together. If there's tension between them now, I don't know. And frankly, it's none of my business. It's their marriage, and they'll have to work through it on their own. As for me, I'm stepping away from Samantha's life. I've done everything I could as her father, and now it's time for me to move on. I thought about replying to her email, maybe even just to set boundaries, but I knew it would only lead to more accusations and negativity from her, so why bother? In other news, I've joined a local biker club. We meet once a week to hang out, have a few drinks, and just enjoy life. It's something new for me, and I think it's exactly what I need right now. I've made a few friends in the biker club, and it's refreshing to have people to connect with. One of the younger guys insisted I join a dating app. He's a good kid and has taken it upon himself to introduce me to the latest trends among younger folks, which is quite amusing. They even set up a Bumble profile for me and are constantly asking if I've had any matches yet. Today, one of them is coming over to give me some pointers on how to chat up women and score a date. Honestly, I'm feeling a bit nervous, but in a good way. I've never done this before, so it's both intimidating and exciting. I finally have friends, a social life, and something to look forward to. I wish I could have my daughter with me and restore my family, but I know that life doesn't always work out the way we hope, and I'm trying to come to terms with that. If I manage to land a date, I'll definitely keep you posted. Feel free to drop any advice for this old man in the comment. Update 2. I actually have my first date today. I matched with a woman named Casey. Well, that's not her real name, of course. She went through a divorce a couple of years ago. Her ex was apparently a major mama's boy, and his mother was always meddling in their relationship. Eventually, she had enough and decided to move on. Right now, things are pretty casual between us. We're just meeting for a couple of drinks. We've been chatting for a while, and I've developed a bit of a crush. Honestly, it feels amazing to get attention again after feeling so starved for it for years. Judith was never the most affectionate partner, so this is a refreshing change for me. I can't believe I'm crushing on someone at 50, but Casey is lovely and kind, and I'd really enjoy spending time with her. I hope our date goes well. My friends are just as excited as I am. They came over last night to help me pick out my outfit, and I didn't realize it was such a big deal. I guess being ancient means I've missed out on some of the dating essentials. They've prepared a list of do's and don'ts for me to memorize, and they're all eagerly waiting for me to fill them in afterward. It's exhilarating to feel young again, to have friends, and to engage in life beyond just responsibilities. I've missed that feeling, and I really hope it lasts because it's something I've longed for more than I can express.